Let me share you what I believe is the most powerful thing a founder can have.
Frank Greeff was the co-founder of Realbase, where he achieved an impressive $180 million exit. He's the host of the Chew the Fat podcast and the author of Eat with Purpose, a cookbook that aims to raise $1 million for children's cancer.
As a founder, I can have 3 master's degrees, 4 doctorates, and 7 PhDs. I just hire them.
Frank is the founder of the Founders Table, a platform for unfiltered discussions among Australia's top business minds. He brings a wealth of entrepreneurial experience and a passion for open dialogue to any conversation.
Good God. Tell you what, side note, the questions today, you've really, you're like, I know the product is really good. Where did you get the signals from? And of course, it's friends, family, and community. That is not the right place to get your signals.
Why?
Because people don't want to let you down. There are always times where your workload as a founder starts to increase and your ability to do things at home starts to decrease. And then you get home and then you have that conversation like, you haven't really been present this week. And you're like,
people saying that anyone can be an entrepreneur. Does that mean everyone should start a business?
the reality is no, because
I would like to welcome my dear friend, Frank Greeff, to the Agency Podcast.
Thank you, sir. It's a lot to follow there. I feel like I better deliver.
You're certainly the kind of guy that kind of wears your heart on your sleeve. You know, you don't like to take things too seriously. However, when it comes to building a business, you're nothing short of an absolute beast.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dane.
I would say that I think from your experience and what you've been able to accomplish in the Australian marketplace is impressive, and we only hope to follow suit. Now, you've spent time with entrepreneurs at every stage of business. If you look at it as not a holistic label that fits everyone, and you were to fractionalize entrepreneurship, how would you break it down into different stages? Like, what cohorts would you break it into?
Oh, Dane. Fucking hell, I like it. Okay, so let me start here. I always like to do this, right? Because people will jump on and share information, and they'll kind of share it like the holy gospel. Like, this is it, or these are the exact stages and breakdowns. The lens I like to take is, this is what I've experienced so far, but there's so much more to the world that I need to experience in order to really crystallize my views on it. I think, who have we seen so far? Who have I met? There's the up and coming, starry-eyed, who's very excited about what the future holds. Let's call that the blue sky entrepreneur. In that same kind of category, it's the realm of possibilities. You know, the one that is always is kind of on the precipice of starting their next venture, but the process of talking about that brings them the dopamine hit, but they never actually take the actual leap.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, we see a lot of those.
One that has been running the Instagram bio entrepreneur for the last 10 years, but never really started. Now, don't want to take a negative, right? Now, then you have the expectations of meets reality, where you now actually starting the world of business. And you've got to take that idea you had and push that through the realities of the marketplace. And I think this is where the journey really begins for people. And that's where a lot of the learnings start. Because when you look at things in a spreadsheet or the back of the envelope maths, like, you can make any idea the next $1 billion idea. You know, I've met people in those early stages, which, like, literally straight face showed me a pitch deck where, you know, their logo far above exceeds that of Meta and Airbnb because of the potential of the opportunity that's in front of me. And those same people never launched that business. Right. So, then we start taking it at different levels. I think the next stages is kind of like you're starting to scale and you're starting to grow. And I think for those kind of 1 to 10 million, it's about like the sheer force and the energy that you, the founder, has, and the ability to take setbacks. But as you start to increase the revenue from there, who you need to become to get there fundamentally needs to shift. And I'll get specific on that. Depending on the type of business, so let's say that business is like a tech product or it requires a lot of people, you start to realize when you get to a certain number of team members in your organization, you, the leader, only have so many levers you can pull. In the early days, you have this ability where, okay, if I want something done, I can roll up my sleeves and get it done. As your business starts to scale and you have more people, you realize like if I roll my sleeves up and get it done, maybe I can account for like increasing 5 people's output, but there's like another 20 people in the business. The mindset that is required is, how do I see talent? How do I place a vision over the organization where we're all striving towards? And how do I coach people and bring them up into places they never thought were available?
Do you think that comes down to, I guess, in these stages beyond 10 million? And let's rewind this for a second. So let's take me into someone who's, making a couple million. They're on their way to 10. At that stage of business, you're still small and nimble enough where you can roll up your sleeves and make a potent impact on your business. But beyond the 10 million, you're saying that you have to radically shift how you behave, think, and operate as an entrepreneur. What are those two different frames of thinking? What's the 3 to 10, and then what's the 10 and beyond?
It's such an interesting thought experiment we're playing, Dane, and it kind of comes back to my first kind of piece that I mentioned. The challenge is when we put things into like these really distinct buckets, is they don't account for all the nuances that live inside business. So even as I shared that idea around, people rolling up your sleeves, like I've met 26-year-olds doing $36 million revenue with a team of 3 people doing e-com. Because, that's the type of business where you can literally like leverage your money into Meta equals product spitting out and increase revenue and profit. So all of these things, I guess, with a grain of salt.
Well, let's look at it through the lens of maybe there's a few outliers that are crushing it in e-com. We can agree with that. But if we just kind of generalize business and look at it from more of a traditional sense, when you're looking to scale an enterprise and you're trying to shoot beyond, let's just say 10 million and you have a team of 30 to 40 people, what kind of gear shift is that?
Yeah, cool. So I think there's the two mindsets I'm talking about. Number one is like the individual contributor. So when you're in those early days, and I'll speak from my context and my experience, I was the number one customer service agent. I handled the most volume of emails and the most volume of phone calls. And I thought at the time that was pretty fucking cool.
You're like, wear that on your chest. Like, I'm out here rolling my sleeves up,
And every month, there would be a report that'd be spat out of our help desk system, and there my name would be at the top. I'm like, man, look at me go again, right? You then start to shift where you have many team members, not just in one role, which is customer support, customer service, and you realize like if I implement more brute force into this, sure, I can take one department and increase its output, but the reality is like for the rest of the domains, the rest of the departments, I'm going to have no impact. So the mindset shifts from individual contribution to what is my highest leverage activity I can do as a founder or leader. For me, when you have a business that's growing in terms of number of team members, and I think that's probably the better metric to look at it here. As a founder leader, the biggest impact you can have is, hey, if I create the energy and the vision in this business and coach people, what if I could get a 5 to 10% increase in people's output across the board? Right. And then if you look at let's say you have 40 team members and you're getting a 5 to 10% increase.
That's heaps.
That's a lot. And you as an individual can never get to that number by yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it becomes not a team of one, but like I'm running full tilt at this particular problem, and I'm going to bring everybody along with me. To now, I'm more like I am here to help those around me, and it's more of a team sport. And I assume the role of a coach.
It brings to mind a teaching that I was unpacking recently, which is that there's only ever 3 stages of activity in a business. One which is growth mode, 2 which is maintenance mode, and then the 3rd which is destruction mode. So at any given time, as a business grows, as you're an entrepreneur, only so much of your business can be in growth mode at any given time. A certain portion needs to stay in maintenance mode, business as usual. It's like what prints us money. And then the destruction mode is like maybe we need to do away with old ways of thinking or old processes or old software or what have you. And a radical example of this is General Electric. They fire the 10% least performing staff year on year, and they have done since the onset of the company. So that's their version of destruction. The bottom 10% every year get annihilated. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm just giving you an example here. When you're running a business and you've had a massive exit and you've had a massive team, you're wearing the responsibility of leadership paired with needing to be kind of the lead thought leader or strategist for the company. You're saying that you can only create growth mode at a certain velocity, whether you roll your sleeves up and do the majority yourself or try to spread that out the 10% across the board.
Yes.
Do you disagree with that? And if you do, explain what you think is
Which part to disagree with?
the growth maintenance destruction.
No,
piece.
I think that's really sound. I think I'm gonna take a step back for 1 second, Dane, and share with you.
Take me down the rabbit hole. Let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's go.
One of my current gripes, is this: in the world of social media and putting out content, what the world loves and the algorithm loves is when things are really black and white. So when you put out a piece of content which is really divisive and people stand on either side of the fence,
right?
And you're like, this is the way, or this is the straight line to success, or this is, and
there's no gray area; it's just black and white.
My challenge is, I think my brain is so nuanced that anytime I hear like, do you disagree with that? I immediately don't go like I do or don't disagree with that. I'm like, I'm sure that is correct in many versions, but I'm also sure there's many permutations where it isn't. And I know that's not necessarily helpful, but I think what it is helpful for people to understand is specifically when you're looking to, let's say, a potential mentor or thought leader to learn from, the challenge I see some people is they can't break away the whole context of an individual because the whole context dictates this is the framework to be successful. I just can't see the world in that way. So the way I think about it is like there is elements of what that person is talking about which are going to make sense to my world and my context that I'm going to take away. And to kind of bring it all the way back here, you said like, the growth, the maintenance and destruction. I think there's many versions of that could be true. And there would be many permutations and nuances where it's not 100% true, right?
Yeah.
Because... for example, let's take the word maintenance mode. Like by definition, if you're maintaining, you're going backwards in the climate purely because of inflation. So if you're maintaining a business at the same revenue you did this year and last year, actually you're doing far worse by anywhere it could be 3 to 7% purely because of inflation.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's hard to maintain a business at a plateau, and I think that I saw this piece by Bruce Lee where he said you can't plateau. You're either growing or falling backwards.
Now that I will 100% agree with.
Yeah, there's no such thing as stagnation. It doesn't really work in business. Yeah. Now, around the thought of people saying that anyone can be an entrepreneur, does that mean everyone should start a business?
Definitely not. So I will definitely take a strong stance towards this. Why? Why can't everybody start a business? I think coming back to the social media landscape, I think a lot of the times what we do is we will celebrate hardships, i.e., forks in the road where people had to go through really tough moments of getting rejected, people not understanding them, them being too early to the market, only when they've succeeded. So when someone comes onto social media and they're like, hey, I haven't succeeded thus far, everything I do fails, none of my team members believe in me, the end of the story, no one cares.
No one cares.
because you haven't yet succeeded and therefore it's not that interesting. And so why I share this is because of survivorship bias. Because when we look at the people on social media and all of the kind of the glitz and the glamour, which is, entrepreneur in the bio and here's the figures I'm getting, we're seeing only, let's call it 10% or less of the people who have actually given it a go. There's the other 90% that have failed along the way, and their stories aren't that interesting and no one would really pay attention to them. But those are probably the biggest learnings, which is why did those 90% of people fail? And I think a lot of it comes down to people are looking at the outcome or the output of the success. And so whether that be the fast cars, the nice house, the cool trips you go on, they're missing a really key and important part, which is the journey, but not from like a retrospective lens, from the point of who did I become through the process? Because when your measure is purely, let's call your success measure is when I do this business, I get this exit, here's the number, and here's the cool things that happen. You're missing the biggest thing that I believe is the most impactful and the biggest value, which is when I started to who I am now is fundamentally different. And what are those learnings and lessons and insights? So come all the way back to should everybody start? The reality is no, because in order to get through that chasm of time, there is so many things along the way that can smash us down, and you have to see the world in such a different way. And I think if people look at the top line piece, which is, that gets them excited, i.e. the numbers, the cars, all that stuff, and don't just take it from an approach of, well, the worst case scenario is I'm going to go back to work. And the worst case scenario is I will learn a lesson along the way. If that doesn't kind of fire you up and truly have something that's going to carry you through the challenges, it's not worthwhile starting.
And if someone has this, well, worst case scenario, I'll just go back to work mentality, you're saying that doesn't really fit the lens of how an entrepreneur tends to see the world, typically.
No, I actually think, I think if that is your starting position, it's just worst case scenario, go back to work. That's a great starting position.
Okay.
You know what so what I mean is if your starting position is at the end here, I'll get an exit and a number and a this and a that and the holidays. The problem is that's probably not enough to push you through. If your starting position is like, what do I have to lose? What's the risk? Then that's fine, because that is the truth.
Yo, my name's Dane Walker and I am disgustingly obsessed with branding. I had to figure out a way to do branding every single day, so I branded myself. Then I started my agency, Rival. And hired a team of branding mavericks hell-bent on creating brands so good that they'll make your competition shit their pants. So here's the thing, you want your brand to go viral and Rival makes brands go viral. That's why we're offering you a free 30-minute branding session to get an expert's opinion. If you don't believe me, the proof is in the pudding. Here's what clients have to say about Rival.
Rival is trusted by brands like Nutrition Warehouse, Light My Bricks, and Vumi.
So if you want to absolutely smoke the competition and make your brand go viral, hit the link below and book in your free 30-minute branding session.
How much do you think entrepreneurship is emotional regulation?
It probably at least 50% of it. And why is that? Because the parts which are like, let's call it the cognitive parts, the logical parts, might be strategy, might be commercialization, might be building product. But in order for those parts to be successful, there are human connection and human touch points along the way. So that might be suppliers, customers, and probably the most emotionally stressful would be team members. And those are the things I find specifically for myself is working through cognitive and logical steps is usually quite straightforward, and you can often have, I guess, like a framework to work you through. Working with emotions and other people, everybody is so unique, and people bring things onto your table which are like essentially like the emotional baggage, and the reality of especially like a early stage growing business is you can't get away from that stuff. And then also like the added baggage is if you come back to this concept, which is the obsession, that obsession often spills over into your own personal life. So like I am incredibly thankful for my wife. She's been very supportive through the years, but there are always times where you're starting to your workload as a founder starts to increase, and your ability to do things at home starts to decrease. And if you have all of that emotional and cognitive pressure that happens through the whatever hours you do, and then you get home and then you have that conversation like you haven't really been present this week, and you're like,
Yeah.
fuck, it's like, that feeling.
That's the worst feeling.
That's the worst feeling. And then you're like, fuck, I'm doing it, like I'm okay. And then you have to recalibrate everything. So I think it's definitely at least 50% of the challenge.
What are some things that you've found helpful for yourself, for your brother Jacques or others that you've worked with to help themselves regulate their emotions, stay ahead of having emotional outbursts, and I guess keeping yourself contained, dialed in, and in a healthy way?
So there was this really interesting study that was done, which is a rat in a bucket. And what happened was they dropped a rat in a bucket of water, and the rat would kick until it drowns. And the rats en masse would last usually about 45 minutes.
Right.
Now, they did a separate part to the study, which is they would put the rat in the water. They would take the rat out at about 40 minutes and then put the rat back in the water. And now the next time the rat can kick for 48 hours.
Wow.
So the hope that the rat faced, because they knew like at some stage someone's going to take me out of this water.
It had hope.
It had hope. And so it kept going and kept fighting. And so to come back to your question, which is what is something that can help you get through the emotional piece? Honestly, it's time at bat and the amount of years, hours, weeks, whatever that you've spent in the game. Because once you go through these waves and these seasons of like really intense emotional, logical, all the pressure that's involved, and you get through that season and you go start the next, you kind of go, okay, I've been here before and I was okay. And I think just like building the cadence of like ebbs and flows of a season helps a person, or certainly helps me get through the next one. Another one I'm really obsessed with at the moment is, our journey was 12 years from start to finish with the exit there. And every time I've kind of shared on podcasts or people want to talk or keynote, whatever it is, people are really interested in the challenges, the failures, the lessons learnt. And the high notes, which are, and then we did the deal and we made the money, that makes up like 2 minutes of it because there's nothing really to learn from that. And so what I realize now these days, starting our next venture, is those are stories to tell. And so something that helps me, like literally today, I was thinking about that this morning, is I go through something, i.e. someone like doubts the product or doubts you or talk shit, and you go, I'm writing a story in the moment. And so I reframe from like, I'm so disappointed, like this person doesn't care, to, how good. This is going to make up make up a story. Yeah. The next one for me is around energy management. So recently a lot of people ask me around like, how do you time manage to get the most out of the day? I care a lot less about time management than I do about energy management.
What's energy management?
Glad you asked. So energy management is like, how do I, as a founder leader, how do I stay at my optimal state of energy, let's call that flow, for as long as possible, day in and day out, week in and week out? And so the couple of things that I've implemented in my life through the learnings of the last business that are like non-negotiables. So number one is I stopped drinking about 2 years ago, because what I realized was Monday would come and I would be at a kind of a lowish level of energy. And by Friday, I'm at like peak energy and I'm like kicking goals. And then Saturday comes and I have 5 or 6 drinks. I was never like a big bender guy, but 5 or 6 drinks. And then Monday comes and I start again and I have to work my way up. And so what I found with drinking is you're ebbing and flowing on a weekly basis from like really high highs to really low lows. Whereas removing that is like I remain at like 75% at all times.
Okay.
And that was one of the biggest impacts, because what that meant is then I'm consistent with my sleep, which is the next part of my energy management, is like making sure there's non-negotiable between 6 and 8 hours every night. I could talk on this one for a long time. This is a good framework one for you, Dave. The next one is around exercise. So for me, I think a lot about cognitive inputs into my mind and the load and pressure that builds as we start to stretch our cognitive load. So if you like have an audit of your day and you go, okay, I woke up at, let's call it 6 a.m. and I went to bed at 10 p.m. How many minutes of my day did I not have an input? And an input can be defined as conversations with people, phone calls, looking at your phone, listening to music, podcasts, talking to your wife or husband. And honestly, like when I started doing that, I was maybe 3 minutes in a day where I didn't have an input. And so, people talk about like meditation. And so for me, like my version of this is like going for a run and I don't take headphones. I don't listen to a podcast. I do nothing but be in my own thoughts, which is, occasionally scary. But that is a time in the day, which is like an allotted, like really intentional, I have no inputs. I'm just here with clear thoughts, which like brings your capacity back to a really good realm. Okay. And finally, for energy management for me, and I think this is probably the most critical, there are tasks in your business that take your energy. For me, it's like admin, email, phone conversations I don't feel like having, and all of these things that everybody can think about. And then there are tasks that give you energy. So when you leave that conversation or you leave that presentation or you leave that marketing meeting, you leave with more energy than you came in. And so what I realized is like, in order for me to be the highest leverage founder I can, how do I stack my entire day with tasks that tasks that give me energy rather than steal my energy? And everybody has this. And so consider those to be your highest leverage tasks, because often you can then do more output in a day because you're not like, dragging your heels to get something done.
I think that's such an important conversation that I haven't heard talked about much. And, you make a good point there about people often focus on the failures and how to avoid them and what's the silver bullet and what are the actions I need to take. But you're saying that in many cases, each person's emotional output, how they regulate themselves and how they invest their time is such an important part of entrepreneurship that, doesn't in and of itself speak of sex appeal or of the glory of fame or what have you, but it's like that rinse and repeat, managing my energy, managing my flow states, making sure I'm productive, making sure I'm doing things that fill my cup up. So much of entrepreneurship, building a business, being a founder, a CEO, whatever, is staying in that state.
Exactly. And what really helps is having a longer term time horizon. So people often get this wrong, which is like, I work really hard, and they think about it from a week by week or a month by month or a couple of years. Like, most businesses, to like really make a big impact, is like a 10-year time horizon.
Yeah.
So like this, when we started our next business, is like, we've been talking about like, we want to write like a white paper of what does the next 10 years look like.
Right.
And so when you have that lens and you have that thinking, it also helps you kind of throttle back when you go like, I feel I could work 90 hours this week, and you realize like, I could do that, but then next week I'll have an impact, and how many years until that boils down. So what can I do to remain at like that perfect spot for a longer period of time?
Right. Like marathon instead of a sprint.
Exactly.
So why do entrepreneurs act like working themselves into burnout is a badge of honor?
I think a lot of these things happen because what starts is like a bit like the yo-yo effect. The person who brings a yo-yo into the school, if they're cool or not cool, defines if the yo-yo becomes an epidemic or if it phases away. Right. And so I think the early stage yo-yo effect that was created with like the entrepreneur grind and hustle was who brought that in. And, the fast cars, the Lambos, all this cool stuff that people started to see in the bio. And then you've got the Elon Musk, the Mark Zuckerbergs, and all these people who, in their autobiographies talk about sleeping behind their desk and et cetera, et cetera. And so then that creates like, okay, if I want this entrepreneurship, I must do this.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is part of my gripe, which I talked about before, which is like, you absolutely can. And I will never be like Elon because I'm not prepared to do that. But it is not required. And I think it's, people glorify the wrong metric, and the wrong metric is hours. Hours doesn't mean anything. Grinding and sleeping behind your desk does not actually equal output.
Right? When you say it like that, it makes sense.
Right. Like it doesn't. And it could be like, if someone comes to me and like, hey, I have built a $50 million business and I did it at 9 to 5 and I still went home and had a great time with my wife or husband. And the other person says, I've been grinding 90 hours a week for 10 years and they've got a $3 million business. I'm not like, well, they are better because they worked more hours. It's like that metric is kind of irrelevant. If you are a part of the 1% of people who can remain at the highest level of output whilst doing 90 hours, great, good on you, and you'll go further than myself. But if you're like most other humans, like you don't have that ability to run at 95 to 100% of capacity at all times.
And do you think that society at large is celebrating this because it has a sheen to it, like the hustle bro culture, and is it all about materialism? Like, what is it, do you think is allowing to catch on and have such an impact in, I guess, the zeitgeist of what it means to be an entrepreneur?
I think these things are a bit like a pendulum, right? So if I go back to the start of my journey of building a business, at that time, the thing that was in the zeitgeist was the 4-hour work week.
Oh, right.
Right. And so that was like, I feel like that was the early stage.
Almost the opposite.
It was the complete opposite, which was like, and there's certainly... There is almost two ends of the spectrum still to this day, which is like, I want to be the nomad software engineer that works from Bali, that works 3 hours a day, and I can show you that it's been done. And then there's the other person. Why do I think it's celebrated? It kind of comes back to that same point. I think it's celebrated because they're taking the wrong view of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And again, they're using the wrong metrics to define someone's success. And if I come all the way back to like social media, it's because where we started with social media is you are choosing what other people get to see. So you are choosing to show my favorite ones recently is like the laptop in the fast car, the Ferrari, and like all of these things that like, there is a business that allows you to rent a private jet and pretend you're flying in it so that you can take photos and put it on Instagram. I just think it's like one of those things is like the true reality is those things do drum up more engagements and views on social media, and therefore people go to what is exploding, what is the algorithm showing you, and the algorithm still shows you like that is cool, and so therefore they're like, how do they get there? Oh, it's the 90-hour weeks, therefore I must do the same.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that many times in my personal experience growing a business, some of the seasons where I worked the hardest, the longest amount of hours, I was the least productive. And I think when you slow down, zoom out, and ask yourself the question of like, where am I most effective? Where is my time better spent? And am I emotionally regulated? Am I happy? Am I coming at a place where energetically my team are like, oh, you're in a good mood this week? And it's like, that's more of a better flow and effect for my business than coming in and being pissed off and being like, I worked 120 hours. So let's just go back to the example you were sharing just now where someone was working really hard and they have a $3 million business.
Yep.
And then someone who's kind of chill, could potentially have a $50 million business. And you and I have both met these people where we're like, how the fuck is this guy a billionaire? He's so chill.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, they're crushing it. And then someone else is working their face off and they're barely able to pay their bills. How do you know if pushing through your journey as a business builder is about the necessary hardship versus the refusal to accept that what you're currently doing is not working?
It's so tricky, right? To think about that, because it's a really good point, because there's so many points in a journey, which is like, am I just beating my head against the wall?
Yeah. Am I nuts? Is it actually going to work?
Or should I just be stopping? I think about this from it's just actually time in the game. And so what is really important is how long you stay in the game, and your mindset towards the game. And when I talk about the game, I mean the game of building business, because I couldn't tell you when the right moment is, because there's so many examples of people who like went for 5 years doing one thing and all of a sudden that wasn't the thing and the other thing explodes, and like they had they not pivoted, they wouldn't be doing anything. But I think what's most important is everybody's journey that has gotten them somewhere. The only way they got somewhere was remaining in the game. That is the real metric. Is like you have to in our journey, there are so many versions where we like pivoted and changed, but the one thing that remains constant is like we were in the game. And so what I would pay attention to is like, what are the signals trying to tell you this is the right or wrong thing? Here's the first signal. Do you have a good product? That is the first and most critical signal. And what I was kind of getting to in this really long-winded way was, how do you look for that signal? So for example, is there another competitor in the market that seems to be crushing it, but you're not? Okay. Well, what are they doing that you are not doing? And have you been in front of enough customers to define it is good or it is not good? So one of the challenges I see, I recently just spoke to someone who might be listening, so hopefully I'm being kind. He just launched a business, and the business, I'm going to make it a bit vague so he won't be sad. He just launched a business and he's like, I know the product is really good, is what he said. Okay, cool. Okay, what is your sample size? How many people have given you that? And where did you get the signals from? And of course, it's friends, family, and community.
Oh.
Right? That is not the right place to get your signals.
Why?
Because people don't want to let you down. Most humans are empathetic. And when you tell your friends and family, here's my business idea, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to be like, oh my God, honey, that's amazing. Like, go do it.
You got this.
Because they don't have experience the reality of what it looks like to do it.
Yeah.
Or the other signal that they're going to tell you is like, oh, don't. Like, oh, you got such a comfy, safe job. Both are bad. Both, don't listen to both, because you're going to the wrong place. So you need to go to the actual customers who are going to have your product. and make sure that they touch and feel the product and you can get the feedback back. Now, when I say touch and feel, that might be tech, it might be e-commerce, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you need customers. And so you need to define, am I onto a right product with a customer? The next is, what is another signal that tells you if you should remain in the game? I think another signal which is really interesting, and it's something we're seeing at the moment, it's like people's attention on you. So sometimes a signal might be you're not getting a lot of people purchasing your product, but you're having a lot of people reach out and ask kind of questions almost like ancillary to what you're doing.
Right.
And so
they're curious about what's happening.
They're curious about what's happening. Again, not friends and family. Why do I believe this is a good signal? I think it's like when people can see what you're doing and are starting to ask questions, it's usually from different positions. One might be like they see you as a threat. Another might be they like see this as like a interesting, where is this going? And those to me are telling me like I'm on the right direction, but maybe I need to like change and adjust.
Maybe you don't have like in Hermosi's case, the Godfather offer where you can say like unequivocally, this is a no-brainer, and they're like add to cart, check out, or like let's definitely do that. You know, so for example, at the moment, I'm producing a lot of media and content again about personal branding, thus the book and etc. And, you know, what we're finding is a lot of people that are C-suite executives, COOs, CMOs, CEOs, founders, people that have, you know, run $50 to $200 million businesses and now starting to go, tell me more about this personal branding stuff. And I'm like, why is it now that people in this realm, you know, VCs, founders that have run businesses for 2 decades are now starting to go, what's this personal branding stuff all about? And the deeper I go, the more I'm starting to realize that, oh, they're now just beginning to feel the pressure from the guy like myself or yourself who's out here producing media, getting all this attention. And they're like, hey, why are these people that are a fraction of the size of us getting all this attention and converting all these leads? Fear. Competition, urgency. I could be missing out. There's something here that I'm not quite capitalizing on. However, the final piece is missing, which is how do we then convert said client at that caliber? And I think that typically at that realm of business, they want a warm introduction. They don't want a cold social media Instagram guy to tell them what's up about business. They want someone in their own close affinity and social circles to go, you should go talk to him. So in many aspects, what you're saying is a signal is they're interested, but they're not yet buying. You might have an offer issue.
Yeah, exactly right. And it might not. That signal might not always come from like a potential customer, but it's like people around that. So whether it be suppliers, competitors, investors, whatever that is, those are things that like you're kind of on the right direction.
Right. Are there any other signals that you should pay attention to know if your business is doing well or not? I think one signal for me is like you're getting the life sucked out of you doing it. I just think that if you're like the idea is there, the money's there, but you're like, this is killing me.
That's a good one.
Like, how can you even justify the continuation of that? Like, surely if you're getting burnout, there's a lack of some purpose or motivation.
That's a really good one, because that's going to tell you like, well, regardless of this, I get an added extra zero. The reality is like, I'm going to be pushing shit up the hill for the years to come.
Now, shifting gears here a little bit, unless you have other signals.
No, please.
Shift away from the signals. All right. So if we look at entrepreneurship as a whole, like it's so contextual. It's so, I guess, objective versus subjective. And I was reading a book by Alan Watts recently, and he was talking about the difference between subjectivity and objectivity. Subjectivity meaning that you've experienced it, and objectivity means you're giving it an opinion piece on it, but not have you yourself lived it. And he was using it from the example of like, if I were to go to Asia and become a Buddhist, and if I were to actually go on that trip and actually, go through that entire process and live that lifestyle, you would then have a subjective perspective on what Buddhism is. But then to have objectivity is to be a university lecturer that would teach religion and teach Buddhism, having never been in the East, having never lived it. So do you think that entrepreneurship, there's an issue or a constraint right now on social media, on the public as a whole, is that you have all of these people speaking from objectivity, but very few people speaking from actual experience?
The difference between like theoretical and lived experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think one of the challenges with social media is like really what's happening is there's like a rise of business of interest. And a lot of those businesses of interest are, it's the online course guru who teaches you the theory of business. And the only way that they've made their money is through selling you courses on the theory of business.
Which is ironic.
Yeah, that's right. Or it's the huge e-com brand, or it's it's a lot of these like almost, let's call it like air quotes, sexy businesses.
Yeah.
There's not a great deal of people building personal brand and teaching content.
How to
of
build
like,
a law firm. Yeah.
That's right. Like I built the world's best dumpster business, and we've revolutionized the way we're doing environment. Like that's not really that sexy, and I can see that in content that I deliver. Like I could be talking about, let's say, like how to best hire people, and they're like the frameworks to use on YouTube, and people are like, yeah, that's boring. But as if I like say like, oh, here's this one AI tool that like scaled a business 300%. It's like fucking oath, like get me at that. And so it's like the algorithm and what people watch rises things to the top. And so I think a lot of the time is like it's just a kind of almost a one-dimensional view of the whole landscape.
Business owners, if you're stuck using one platform for every project, you're probably stuck in a growth bottleneck. More clients means more hires, which just adds noise and cuts into profits. To break the loop, you need flexible tools that don't stretch your resources. Wix Studio is a smart addition to your business toolkit. Intuitive by design, your team can quickly master the platform and focus on the work that matters the most. Then keep up the momentum with a built-in management tool, a unified dashboard, reusable assets, and a Figma plugin that turns static design into launch-ready websites. With robust native business solutions like bookings, e-commerce, and events, you can take any project at any scale without the added cost of third-party plugins. Plus, Wix Studio is a low-maintenance platform, meaning you can redirect the client budget towards real growth initiatives. Think more value for clients, steady income streams, and stronger relationships. To get started, simply go to wix.com/studio. What I think is interesting, Frank, is you've gone through this tumultuous journey for 12 years to get to a massive exit. And you've probably had a hiatus for maybe 6 months or 12 months. And now you're right back at ground zero, building a new business from scratch. What has this transition been like for you, having gone through an exit? Now, not necessarily back at square one, but you're beginning something new. What's that been like for your psyche? What shift have you had to make to get back into the trenches to build a business?
What I've been trying to do this time around is really focus on like what is the lived experience and the lessons I've learned, and how do I make sure that I bring them from the ground up and not have to relearn the lessons. I think one of the challenges like being a human is sometimes we live a lesson and we're like, I'll never make that again. And then enough time passes that you make that same mistake and you're like, fucking hell. And so like one of the keys for us is actually like really long-term strategic thinking. We've essentially like mapped out like what is hypothetically 10 years look like? What are the different tranches and stages? Now, a lot of it's going to shift in terms of, how you get there, but in terms of like an outcome we want, it's that kind of level of like long-term thinking. The next is like when you go through the journey, what we learned is like your highest leverage output, like your highest leverage tasks and activities, and really stacking that this time. Like what's really different is when we first started business, like you sat down at the computer and you're like, okay, we've got to create a business. And you got to go through the logical flow, where this time it's going, okay, how do we make sure that every minute is spent in the most optimal way? And to be honest, like our version of that right now is content. Like we've realized that like the best leverage time we can have like minute by minute is like making content. Because where I believe businesses get to win in 2025 is pure like distribution, because if you have the distribution, you can solve almost everything else along the way. So, for example, our customer base that we will be building tech products around is experienced founders, and so we decided that's the customer we want, and so let's like front load all of the let's essentially call it like customer acquisition or the relationship building prior. And so, coming back to this, like, what are we doing differently this time around?
Yeah, because I guess like what I think is interesting here is you're bringing a decade of experience.
Yeah.
So then, like, if I were to start a business now,
Yes.
how would I compress that energy and
Got
have
it.
the explosive energy that you're having now? One of those things which you're mentioning
Yes.
there is to produce media, produce content.
Yes, yeah, cool. Okay, actually, that's a better frame for me to work with. So, the next is talent. So I think, we're going through the journey. Last time we got to 400 team members. I would have done hundreds of interviews. And so once you meet one or two 10x people and you get to see what like when a superstar, like what they can output in comparison to everybody else, you realize like the job of being an entrepreneur is really simple. It's setting a top level vision, like what are we all striving towards, and finding the right people to sit in the roles and like making sure they're the best version that they can be. So like we are doing an outrageous amount of our time right now is building out a talent bench of people that we believe are going to be those 10x people and trying to have a much smaller amount of them.
How do you know someone's actually going to be productive in your business? Versus giving you the air quotes and like, yeah, I'm going to work really hard. Yeah. Meanwhile, you can get a read on if someone's legit or not.
Yeah. So here's the great learning lessons you go through when you've hired many people. There's a difference between the person you meet for the hour or two when you're doing a job interview compared to the realities of working with them for the next 3 months. Usually 3 to 6 months tells you if that person is or isn't good. And so what the big learnings for us is like constant and consistent feedback regularly. Where we made a big mistake last time is like, someone would do a day's work, share with you what they've done, and you kind of go, oh, that's not very good, but you don't say anything because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And before you know it, it's gone 3 months, and then you finally do some kind of review and that person's like shocked around what happened. What we do this time is it's consistent daily feedback and creating a culture of feedback. So what I like to do with everybody is like literally in the first week we hired people, at the end of day 5, I said to them like, what did you expect when you worked with us compared to what was reality? And trying to understand like how we communicated what we're doing compared to what we're actually doing and get a sense check of like, is there a gap between those two things? And part of the reason is, one, I want to get better. But number 2, which is probably more important, is like I want to show that as a leader founder, I am not too good to receive feedback. So you're embedding this culture of feedback because then tomorrow when I have to deliver you feedback in terms of, hey, like I'm a little bit concerned about the output, how can we increase that output? It's not like, whoa, shock. It's like, okay, I understand, like this is the process we're going to go through.
Yeah, so you're creating a culture of feedback, a culture of collaboration, a culture of candid honesty, and you're trying to get people to be as productive and proficient as possible. Now, you said that one thing that you're finding is beneficial to the business right now is producing content. Why do you think it's so potent that businesses now produce content when it's good? Like, why is it so important that businesses have to have a division of content creation?
Let me start here. I think we're in the best time for starting from ground zero and producing content than we've ever been. And what happened a couple of years ago was like the TikTokification of all social media. So previously, let's talk about it from a position of Instagram. You started in Instagram, you slowly started to build your followers. And if you were good enough at some stage, you had lots and lots of followers. Every time you post a piece of content, it goes through to your followers. And it was really hard to kind of get a leg up and break through. TikTok came around and they went, we don't give a fuck about your followers. All we care about is that one piece of organic content. Is it good? And if it is good, we'll show it to people.
Right. So then rather than being a merit-based system based on your followership, it's a more of a meritocracy of like, is this content good or bad?
Yep.
If it's great, we'll blast it. If
Exactly.
not, game over.
Exactly. And so
you're saying that this is evening the playing field?
This is evening the playing field. This is evening the playing field. And it means that people, like, there is no excuses. So only like 2 weeks ago did I start going, okay, I'm going to start like taking it seriously with TikTok and start doing it from my phone. At that time, I must have had like, I don't know, a whopping 300 followers and all of my content got like 200 views. I finally like bit the bullet, got over myself and started posting content, which TikTok likes, which is like from your phone. Day 2 pieces of content later, one of them blows up to 45,000 views, and a guy from America who has a $2.2 billion public listed business says to me, hey, Frank, just want to reach out and let you know I loved your TikTok last night. That is fundamentally fucking wild, right? That can happen through such a small period of time to get distribution to someone there.
Yeah. And just for context, how many followers do you have on TikTok right now?
Oh, like nothing, like 3,000.
Yeah.
3,000, right?
And you're getting organic reach that's in the likes of, the neighborhood of billionaires who go, hey, that's a cool piece of content.
Correct, right? And so all the way back down to like, why should people do it? I just think like there is many marketing channels and marketing mixes you can do and leverage. I don't believe there's anything as high leverage and as cost effective as organic social media. If you had to ask me, okay, what would it look like to cost? What's the cost to get to 45,000 people, and you can only spend 7 minutes of your time? There's no, and cost you no dollars. There's nothing else, like no other opportunity for you. But I think the piece that most people are missing, regardless of the customer, is the talent that you get inside. So to circle all the way back before, you said like, how are you looking for talent now, or what are you doing to find 10x talent? 100% of the talent or the people who have applied for a job with us and gotten a job have come from my content. So when they arrive and have a conversation with me, they know who I am, they know my story, they know what I stand for. And so the social media acts like a sieve to you. And so only people who resonate with you, the leader, are applying. And that, I believe, is the unfair advantage that people with content are going to have today and moving forward, is they will literally be able to do one Instagram story or one TikTok story, and they can get access to any type of talent they want.
What if my excuse is I've never done it before, I don't understand social media, and I don't have time for it?
Love that. Those are all very good excuses, and you should keep living your best life. So story time. One of our first hires 3 weeks ago, he moved from WA to Sydney because he saw me on content. And what I wanted to do is every one of our team members, we want to have like an employee-led content strategy. So they have to download TikTok, download Instagram, create an account, and each day post a piece of content. Okay, 3 weeks ago. He starts 2 weeks ago, he's about 10 posts on his TikTok, and just 3 days ago, his first TikTok has blown up. He's got 150,000 views on a single piece of content. His aggregated total time, I would say, in posting content would be 3 to 4 hours. And so his starting position was didn't have an account to now that, and the time horizon is nothing. And so I don't think any of those excuses are real. The only one excuse I could understand and go, yeah, fair enough, would be I live a private life and I don't want anybody to see, me. I understand that. I would never try and combat against that. But if that's not a concern for yours, there is no excuse, because like literally the time and effort is like 7 to 10 minutes each day. And here's the beautiful part. Some people are nervous because like, I don't want to look bad. Don't worry, because it won't do well. And it won't be shown to anybody. Only once you start to get a bit better will it start to perform better, and then it'll be seen by more people.
Right. So there's an irony, and I'm scared of what people will think of me. But if no one's going to see it, what are you scared of?
No one's going to be thinking about you. Don't worry. Like, it's all good.
Yeah, unless you go viral for some
for the wrong reason. Yeah. I guess
what about your fear around? Okay, like I'm seeing this trend with employee-based content. There's a fear that, well, what if they blow up and then they leave me?
Yeah. That's going to happen. That will happen to someone's business at some stage. It may happen to me sometime in the future. I find a better way to think about things is like think about it from an abundance mindset rather than like a finite mindset. So people go, it's the same as like if a person inside your business has a side hustle. Well, what if their side hustle turns into a real hustle and then they leave me? That's okay, because what are the other possible positives that are going to be on flow of that? So for example, a lot of people talk about, we have a great culture. Amazing. What if people inside your business had an employee-led strategy that started being seen by lots of people, and through people watching someone have fun, do things, entertaining, whatever it might be in your business, seeing their account, they're seeing the culture signals. So yes, at some stage that person may leave because now they're blowing up, but during the time of them getting to that level, like there's probably a lot of positive things that are going to happen along the way. And it's an and, not an or, that's going to happen.
From your perspective, I guess, how do you balance trusting your gut in these situations? Like these people that you're around, you're spending time with, how do you balance trusting your gut versus trusting the data that your company's growing? So the data says one thing, your gut's screaming at you something else. Maybe there's a dilemma between the two that don't completely line up. You're like, the data says this, my gut says that. If intuition got you to a certain point in business, does it still mean it's a good tool for the next stage? At what point should you be like, I should be looking at data right now, I should be trusting my gut?
I believe, and I will let you know as I go through this journey, that intuition is like 50% of my decision making and will continue to be in perpetuity, personally. So let me talk through this. Because Dane's like, what the fuck?
I'm like, what do you mean 50%? That's a lot.
Yeah. And here's why. It depends how you go through the process of your gut.
Okay.
So if
How would you define your gut?
I will talk you through that, my good man. You got me on a good topic. What some people get wrong about their gut in the early days is their gut is not predicated on any information and has no way of like it's right or wrong. It's just like, I have a feeling and I acted on it. Now, the problem is like, you don't know what success or failure or those kind of things are yet. And so you're just acting off a feeling. What I do is I continuously and iteratively train my, let's call it gut or intuition. And the way I define it for myself is my brain's ability to subconsciously and quickly process something so something doesn't have to come to my conscious mind. So I think it's like 90% of our processing happens subconsciously. And so my view of your gut is often like, it's just a subconscious signal telling you like, this is good, this is bad. And so my process is at the end of anything that I believe was worthwhile and important decision, i.e., I'm going to an investment meeting, I'm having someone pitch a business to me, I'm hiring a team member, whatever it is, I will spend 5 minutes at the end of the meeting, and I do this with Jacques literally every day, and I say like, what was the gut reaction you had? And we will document that. So I believe that's right. I believe that's wrong. Why?
So you almost like have a gut journal and you're consistently writing in it.
And I'm testing and measuring.
Right.
So I believe this was the right decision. And then when I get the data that tells me that was the right or wrong decision, I have to marry it up to be like, it was the right or it was wrong. Because all I'm trying to do is strengthen the process, which
Right,
is...
my gut was wrong. Let me learn from that. Or it was right. Let's double down.
Correct. And so that's why I say to you, I believe it will happen in perpetuity. That'll always be 50-50 because I just think so much power happens in that subconscious processing. So it's not just like a willy-nilly feeling like, I think it feels good. It's actually predicated on true information.
And has there been something recently where the data doesn't make sense, but your gut was right?
I think I analyze it too much to tell me something like that. So like, this is the level of detail I go. Like I have at the bottom of my notes for any one of these types of meetings, which I call my subconscious or psychological signals. So for example, when I say something to someone and I notice there's like a change of their kind of, they you know, their eyes change or their body language changes. Often when you haven't trained your gut, you will just think, I'm getting gut instincts to tell me this is right or wrong because your body's processing these things like your body language. Where I make sure I like look at it and like I'm really trying to pay attention. And so like I'm trying to, and I guess it's the benefit of sometimes of having a co-founder is I can see two people's interactions and I can see how that changes. You know,
right, so you're observing.
I can observe as well as like in the moment I'm observing and I'm always taking notes of this. So like what I do, which seems to be unique, is every conversation I have, probably not this podcast today though, because that'd be weird for the audience. Every conversation I have is I will come out with probably 2 A4 pages of notes. And a big chunk of it will be around like gut intuition or like subconscious psychological signals. Because I think those are the things that people, unless you're like a master manipulator, you really can't hide those things. And those are the things that I reflect on. So to your question, like, have I had that right or wrong? I think I probably had it more times right because I pay so much attention to it, really down to like the fine details.
Yeah, there's a quote I saw the other day and it said that the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And so is the salvation. And I think that in business, the details, if you're not paying attention to your gut, you're not paying attention to the data, you're not paying attention to what's happened in the past, like it's almost like as an entrepreneur, as your career compounds, you need to compound your gut, you need to compound your data set, you need to compound like you need to get faster and faster and better at capturing these things.
It's like a muscle. You have to train it.
Yeah, you have to train it.
And you have to have a measure like, was it right? Was it wrong? Not just like I felt something. Because if the gut is just I feel something, so I go for it, or the other alternative, the reason I said it's 50%, if your gut's like I go for it, and then you're looking at the data, and the data's like, do not do this. It's a terrible decision. And you're like, oh, good, my gut told me to do it. It's like, whoa, there's something not adding up.
And for these people that you're spending time with that are successful, what would you say is like the typical essential starter kit for a successful founder? What are some skill sets that you like to see highlighted to give yourself some more confidence that, hey, this person's going to make it?
Let me share you what I believe is the most powerful thing a founder can have. Communication. I think communication, the skill and the art of being able to communicate, I'm currently challenging myself, but I believe this is the number one most important thing a founder can have. Why? So recently we were invited to like as a family office to be a startup pitch night. And we saw 10 different pitches. And there were certain founders that walked on the stage, and the moment they walked on the stage, they like had this energy which like filled the room and captivated the audience. And what happened was like the product wasn't really about the product, but just something was like, whoa, this is like really powerful. And I thought about this, and I thought about like, is there like a bias towards people who know how to communicate? And I realized like, well, the reality is the communication is going to happen at every level of their business. So that person's going to need to communicate why to buy into the vision to an investor. They're going to need to communicate why to buy into this to their employees, for the employees to be like fully committed to this process, to their suppliers, to their customers. And there's this roll-on effect, which is like, and it doesn't matter what stage of the business, their ability to communicate, articulate, and inspire people remains true. Even to the point where you could be like, well, any other skill set, that person will be able to inspire and kind of purchase that skill set. You know, so someone might say to me, no, because you need to be like a technical founder if you're a tech company. Yeah, but if you have a really good ability to communicate and like share your dream and vision and have people buy into it, we could just go find yourself a co-founder.
Wow.
I would say in my current thinking, that is the first principle of the most important thing you can do as a founder.
What do you think of this argument that you have to be a deep domain expert in order to survive in an echelon of business?
I think that if that was like a kind of a binary rule, like do you have to be or do you not have to be?
Right.
I would say you don't have to be. Why? Because when we started our business, I was not a domain expert in real estate marketing. But through the process of being committed, I learned how to become that. I didn't start that way.
Do you think that like what you said there about communication, right?
Yes.
When you're at in this kind of Shark Tank situation and people are pitching to you, if they can communicate clearly, concisely, and effectively, you have a much higher volume of confidence that they're going to make it because they can sell to all those around them.
Well, that's it. They'll be able to sell to get team members in. They'll be able to sell to customers. They'll be able to sell to suppliers. They'll be able to sell to all these different levels, as well as sell to potentially, the talent that is required. You know, I had someone today it was like a hate comment on TikTok, and he was like, blah, 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 shut up, don't talk about this. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like, you don't even know basic 101 economics. And I had this really good thought. I was like, it's so funny because as a founder, I can have 3 master's degrees, 4 doctorates, and 7 PhDs. I just hire them. I don't have to go and do that degree.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I don't even know how many degrees we have here. I don't have any of them. But I think this debate is interesting because you would say that, okay, like you have to have this grandiose $1 million idea or $1 billion idea to succeed. How much do you think of being a founder is just pure, raw communication and the ability to sell a vision, to sell an idea, to sell a concept versus just having a great concept? Like almost like you could sell your way to having a good concept, even though your product is average or subpar.
So let me caveat that, right? I don't believe that that's the only skill set that is required and nothing else is important. But I said if I had to choose any skill set to go, okay, you have to like this one, if you can master this, I have more confidence you'll be able to do the rest. That's the starting position.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, because you could be, and these are the examples, they were clearly amazing domain experts. They were clearly, but their ability to communicate it was this. Guys, we're doing like environmental tech and it's like amazing and and you're just like, everybody's face is like, And you're just like, okay, that is going to have a roll-on effect to everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in having the deep domain knowledge. But if I had to choose one skill set, it's the art of communication.
So the art of communication.
Yes.
What other skill sets do you think, I guess, founders need to have?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
The next would be adaptability to change. So the journey is never straightforward. There is so many ups and downs and changes that need to happen. Like you might believe, here's the outcome, whatever that looks like. But the reality is how to get there is going to be constantly filled with change. So if you're a person who likes to be comfortable and likes to be like, okay, tomorrow I'll be at this desk and I'll do this from 9 to 5, that's a fundamental personality challenge that you're going to face. In order to be really effective as a founder, there's going to be a lot of things that you need to go through which you don't know today. And so if you have a process where you're like, no, I know the way, this is the way, it's always this way, I think you're going to not make it because you need to realize that you don't know it all and what can you learn through the process. And you can see this with some people who become like amazing and greats in our kind of the world of business. And the one I love is the founder of Gymshark and how, you know, at year 2 or 3, he stepped down from CEO, became the CMO, you know, the chief marketing officer, and then the chief product officer. And then finally 10 years later becomes a CEO because he realized like, I'm not the best at this. What is the skill set that I can bring in and what can I learn from? And then at one stage and one day, okay, I'm now the best at that. So you have to have this continual mindset of like, I'm learning because that's going to grow your skills and expertise. Because fundamentally, as you bring people on, like it's far better to start knowing about what your business does than just be like, oh no, that's not what I worry about. And so I think communication, adaptability to change, and a continuous learning mindset. I think those are 3 like really high ticket ones that I see time and time again that I think are most valuable.
How do you maintain a learning mindset?
I think the starting position of like having this learning mindset is just you have to not be a person who thinks I know it all. And how that happens often is like who you surround yourself with. Something I've encountered recently is like when people keep their world small and they become the big fish in the small pond is ultimately when they start to think like I know it all. Because yeah, contextually to the 4 people in your sphere, you are the best and you are the smartest. But if you put that context into a bigger marketplace or the world, you're probably like middle of the pack, if at best. And so by surrounding yourself with people and being at tables, meeting people, and you realize like, oh, I'm a tiny fish, I think that keeps you really humble and keeps you continuously realizing like, if I want to get there, I need to know more and I need to learn. And then it's like the daily principles and practice. Like, for my world, I love to follow my curiosity, but it's like if you find things you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So like my one at the moment that's really piquing my interest is like AI. And so like every single week I'm listening to somewhere between 2 and 3 hours of content and then just remaining really curious. Again, like, you know, whether you hire someone or whether you be around, you know, people or peers or other founders and you're asking questions continuously. You know, those challenges where people get into a room and they think they need to talk the most. For me, I'm like, how do you talk the least? Ask lots and lots of curious questions because then when you leave, you can learn the most out of everybody.
I find that's true in particular at a lot of the networking events that you and I attend where people will have opinions and seldomly ask questions. But it's a few that are quiet, that are writing down and asking questions that are taking the most out of that experience versus trying to contribute every time. Now, when it comes to growing a business, let's say someone has the ability to communicate effectively, they're adaptable, and they're insatiably curious to continue to learn. Why is it that some founders struggle to let go of control, even when delegation is the only way to scale?
From what I've encountered, a lot of that is predicated on this idea of I am a perfectionist and I only want the best. And if I want something done right, I do it myself. And as a founder, 99% of the time this is true. You're going to work harder and faster and better than everybody around you. And so therefore, every time you bring a new person on, you're like, why don't you have the same output and care and attention that I have? And once you kind of let go of this mindset and realize, yeah, but once I have 10 people or 20 people or 50 people, I will never be able to do the same output as all of them. And you start to realize, like, while I have this control, I'm limiting the scale at which our business can grow. And if I let go of that and let's hypothesize that things become 10 or 15% less efficient or less good, well, by having a business that's 3 times, 4 times the size, it's the wrong metric that you're defining as less good.
From your experience, have you seen people at that stage refuse to delegate, not because that they can't delegate, but because a part of them is unwilling to let go with the way that their business is to embrace what the business would become?
You know, this is kind of where a lot of things come down to, like, emotional drivers and like why I get obsessed with those, like, gut feel and cognitive, like the subconscious stuff. A lot of our context of a human is like predicated on their childhood. And there's a lot of those things that we don't know or see, but can hold us back in the future years. And one of the key ones there is around, like, letting go sometimes means handing over the keys to the castle. And when people feel that, you know, this is part of their identity, and I want to be seen as the highest output and the highest achiever in my business, and by giving other people the keys, maybe they'll look better than me. And they have these kind of like deep-seated insecurities that hold them back. That is often something why people create like almost a ceiling upon all of their employees, because they still want to be seen as number one.
Right. They want to be the savior to their business.
Correct. And I couldn't tell you how to solve that immediately. It's probably 10, 20 years of therapy, but you sometimes kind of got to audit the way you do things. I've spent a lot of time auditing, like, why is it that I think this way? And a lot of it actually comes down to, like, I was the third child. And there's like these commonalities and things that happen to third child, second childs, and first childs across the world that are just ingrained in us because of how we grew up. And so the third child, for my context, is you get to see the older brother pave the way, the middle brother. Like you have to kind of, in order to be, you know, for me, it was like, how could I be cool enough that my brothers want to let me play the PlayStation with them? So I now have to like learn how to like almost negotiate my way in front of a PlayStation and be like empathetic to, and see all of these like little traits that you learn from that. And so someone might listen and go, yeah, but I'm not the third child, so how does it help? It's just like, try and take a step back and an objective look at yourself and I guess almost kind of go like, what is the reason that I'm getting held back? And what might it be beyond what I think like logically?
Right. You might be putting yourself in your own cage, so to speak, based on your own childhood experience and your own lens on how you believe the world should be. So, for example, in my case, I grew up as essentially a lonely child, which meant that I had to do everything myself, had to be self-sufficient and so forth. And that bled into my business. And then I've had to learn in the business how to be more collaborative, how to delegate, how to give away responsibilities without feeling like I have to clutch everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, with everything that you're doing, I understand that you've gone through, you know, this epic exit, and now you're, you know, on this new journey, and you're doing a multitude of things all at once. When all of this concludes and it's said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
I think there's a number of different layers that I think about when I think about how I want to be remembered. My starting position is like, the way I define and measure success is from a number of different things. And like what I do in business forms a big part of it, but it's not everything. And so like my starting point is actually like to the people that really, truly matter to me, my wife, my son, my soon, you know, a daughter, and my family, my brothers, my parents, that I was an amazing husband, father, son, whatever it might be to them. And I was there and I was present and I was the best version of that I could have been. And I think that's actually what matters more than anything. Because like I'm not deluded in the fact that like I will have a legacy and there'll be a bridge about Frank. Who's like, you're like, the reality is like most people forget about you. And so it's like, it's those people that like really, really matter. And so like, let me come down to like my son is like, I want him to remember how passionate and hardworking and dedicated I was to the mission, but also not in a self-serving way, in a way that helped other people around me. And then from like the external parties that don't matter that much, but certainly I want to have a good positive impact, is like, I want to be known as that person that was continuously striving to get somewhere, but never lost themselves along the way. So I feel kind of fortunate at the moment, which is when I do something like a keynote talk, one of my favorite things to do is I walk into the room and people know the archetype of me. So they know the headline that they saw in the paper or the social media thing, which is 180 million, da, 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 da. And so there's like certain perceptions that come with that, which must be like, oh, he's going to be perfect, this and that and that. And then I walk into the room, I make a few jokes, a couple of dirty ones, a couple of silly ones, and like, holy fuck, the dude's like normal. And I'm like, yeah, because I feel like really lucky and privileged that then they can be like, oh, well, I'm normal and he's normal and he's done that. Like maybe I can do that. And so I love that like ability. Like I want to keep that the whole way through. And I think the longer I keep that, and I believe I'll keep it forever, is like the more impact it has. You know, like on these different stages. Let's say like one day I crack it and I've got the private jet and I've got the $1 billion business, and then you walk into the room and you be that normal person. Like I believe that is the most version, like that's the biggest version of inspiration, and that's what I want to be remembered as.
I think that's powerful, and you are definitely the guy that's, you know, playing this very relatable piece to the community, because it's like, hey, like I'm back in the trenches again. Like come on the journey. I'll document the whole thing. I'll give you, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly every single day. And I think that's where the internet's going. That's where social media content's going. It's this ability to share this raw, unfiltered version of what it really means to build business. Because I think we're coming out of the era where it was really curated on what you showed the public, and there's so many people out there crushing it right now that are just showing the unfiltered raw, like this is what it really means to build a business. What's a door that you need to kick in now to go to the next level in the way you're approaching this business?
There's a couple. So one which I'm really fascinated by at the moment is how do you get to, like we want to get bigger than we did last time at a faster trajectory, but do it with far less people. And so the door I'm trying to kick in is like, how do you get the relative best talent you can have access to, supercharge them with AI and AI agents, and have it so that your end state is like only 50 people. And like, that's a whole new way of thinking, because sometimes it is really like easier to be like, okay, we'll just hire this person, this person, this person, this person, like as the thing grows and as the money allows. But I think there's a certain amount of discipline that's required to be like, no. Like the starting position is, how do we automate it first? And if we can't automate it, have a person involved and they are looking after the automation at some stage. And when people hear that, they may be, you know, some are capitalists and like, fuck yeah. and others are like, wait, what? There's less people having jobs. One of the things that kind of breaks my heart about our last business is we had 400 team members. And I think if I left this room and there was 200 of them in the room next door, there's a strong chance I wouldn't recognize their faces, because they were in multiple countries, because they came through like a merger, so I inherited them. So I didn't get a chance to like know their names, know who they are. And I don't know, it's kind of sad. Like I don't love that. I would rather like walk into that room and I know every single one of the humans and I know like about them, and like they're like part of the journey and they could like thrive and be excited about their success. And because there's less people, we can all kind of share in on the rewards. I think that's way cooler and way more inspiring. And so like our role is like to protect that for as long as we can and hopefully get to a place with fewer people. The second one is, Australia is so small. And so the part that I think I need to kick in is like, how do we either crack an international market from here, or do we have to go over to somewhere like the US and start there? And then there's like this whole world of learnings that I think I'm really naive to, which is, fuck, what does that market look like? You know, I was doing some deep diving on Sunday as to like the differences between the US and Australian economy in terms of like how much money was flowing into like, venture capital. It's so wild. Like, I think the population is something like 15 times the size. I think the venture capital market's like 100 times the size. Yeah. It's so wild.
It's wild.
And so it's like it is a land of, in terms of business, like of pure opportunity. And so I'm like, I gotta crack that and I gotta figure that out. And what does it mean to do that? Because I think there's so many learning lessons along the way.
What part of that excites you the most, and what part of that terrifies you the most?
I'm thinking lots because I'm thinking about what terrifies me. This is the beautiful part about being a founder is if the things that terrify you often, you're just naive to the fact. So I'm just like, it all excites me. Let me share you a story, which is what I find really exciting. It's back to the concept of like, you're writing the story as you go. Each one of these next stages that we get to like enter in business, which the previous kind of last 2 years has been starting content. You start from level 0. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that. The further they get on the timeline and like the more like air quote successful they become, the less likely they are to start at the next place, which is 0, because they don't want to like do something that looks silly. And so like my version of that is like we sold for 180 million, you start on Instagram and 200 people see your stuff. And that's scary to a lot of people because it's like, oh, but like I should be this. But it's like, no. This new level, like this new playing field, you're a baseline and you got to now work your way up there. And so I just continuously think, and so does Jacques, is like, we get to write this story. I had one the other day. I was doing a keynote in Brisbane, and they put me on the graveyard shift, which is after lunch, where everybody's like,
rough.
Yeah.
Everyone's coming in like, ugh,
coming in all slow. And this was meant to be a keynote to 400 people. And so I brought Kai along because we we're going to film it. And so Kai's behind me, and we walk onto the stage. And there was 21 people in the entire auditorium. And I do a keynote to 21 people in a 400 room. And I got off that stage, and the first thing Jacques went was, he goes, fucking oath, we got a video of you walking on a stage to a blank room. How good is that going to be when the next version is you to 40,000 people?
Oh, he was like, what's the opportunity in that?
Like, he's like already thinking about the story to tell. Because like you could leave that place and be beat down like, oh, I thought people liked me more than that. Why are only 20 people? And you're like, but we go like, how good is that? Because now we have documented part of the journey where no one cared, and one day they'll be like, "Boy, I want to get in," and you're like, like it's like, and so everything we see from that lens is like every new opportunity is a new opportunity to learn that you start from day 0, and there's gonna be a sick story to tell because it's like beating your head against the wall because you do the piece of content or you go on stage or you go internationally and no one's gonna care once again, and you have to like reprove and relearn and just like remain in a state of absolute humility until you get there, because you've only you've done certain things to level 1s and 3, but now you go levels 4, 5 and 6, you're starting again.
Frank, I think your greatest gift is genuinely the ability to not give a fuck what anyone thinks. You definitely get high on your own supply. Like I've seen you in workshops. I've seen how much you're like, this idea is going to be sick. And then you roll it out in the market and it crushes. And then the second it breaks or doesn't quite go to plan, you just pivot it, you adjust it. And I think that this is what the modern day entrepreneur needs to have, is this no fucks given approach to making content. It's like the barrel. Like this is what it is to build a business. And it's not about Lamborghinis and Ferraris and throwing money at the problem. You're like genuinely like, I'm in here, I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah. And dude, just props to you with what you're doing and how you're scaling this thing and how you're trying to rally the team and build this epic vision. Like I'm here on the sidelines, man. I'm fucking pumped for you. It's a fun thing to watch. And I'm just covered in goosebumps because I'm excited for what's going to come next for you, dude.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
And but yeah, we would love to get you back to chat again some more. But for today, I think this has been a great eye opener for me, just to realize that, man, like this whole notion about having to play or look a certain way to be successful is just bullshit.
Boom. That's the key takeaway.
That's the key takeaway. But man, thanks for being here. I appreciate you,
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.